The Radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, welcome everybody to Yaron Brook Show on this, I think it's Tuesday evening. Hi everybody. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for being here, taking time from your evening and joining the show. So I'm thinking today, if you remember last show, I kind of laid it all out there. I'm pretty passionate, pretty excited. I felt like I was yelling quite a bit. So, and I basically said a lot, and I wasn't sure today, what am I going to talk about? I really don't have anything to talk about. So I was thinking, I should probably do, after all of that negativity and all the shows I've done, slamming everybody left and right, I should probably do something positive, something easy. I'm kind of tired today. I didn't sleep well last night. I thought, okay, I'll do something easy and positive and inspiring. And I couldn't come up with anything positive and inspiring. Sorry, guys. So instead, I picked three topics that I will show how they connected. Three topics that people hate me the most about, that I get criticized on more than anything else. Right? I mean, it's funny how single-mindedly, narrow-mindedly people are. So, I did this whole show last time. I think we went 2 hours. I covered a huge amount of ground. I tried to inspire you to start a new movement. I laid out my opposition to left and right. And what one of the frequent commenters on the show right now is saying, what he got out of the last show was how obstinate I am with regard to cryptocurrency. I don't know. Sometimes I think it's just hopeless. What the hell am I doing? Anyway, I figured I'd pick three topics. By the way, anybody could ask me a super chat question about cryptocurrency, so you can further see how narrow-minded I am, or maybe just somebody who knows something about finance and economics with regard to cryptocurrency. But in the meantime, we're going to talk about three topics that always get people stood up. I already see I have, within 3 minutes, already 71 live watchers because of the topic. And I'm sure the chat is going to be amusing. I've also decided to be more amused than angry today, so we'll see how long I last, because these topics bring out the best in me. Three of the topics that seem to get people most riled up, that people have lots of questions about, and that I'll just cover one more time. All of them I've covered before. We'll try to do it. We'll try to connect them, see the connection between them. We'll see how long I spend on them, and we'll see where I go. Michael says he prefers the angry Yaron. Yeah, I mean, me too, I guess. We'll probably get there. Oh, and then somebody's asking me what my opinion of Hans Hermann Hoppe. That's the way to get me angry. That's the way to get me angry. So let me start with racism. I told you what racism was last time or the time before. I've talked about racism a lot. I talked about the racism of the anti-racists. I've talked about the racism of the white fragility. And I've often talked in the past about the racism of the various white supremacists or white power groups out there, the alt-right and the various people out there. I've argued that even Stefan Molyneux is a racist, and he's more than that. He's an anti-Semite, and I identified him as an anti-Semite well before I identified him as a racist. I think he started out as an anti-Semite and gravitated towards being a racist. And his anti-Semitism is very, very obvious and comes out very quickly once you watch the shows that he done on Israel. They're so biased, they're so skewed, they're so ugly that it's obvious. Now, Molyneux just got banned by YouTube. I'm not happy that he got banned by YouTube at all. I think YouTube standards are weird. the number of racists on the left that are on YouTube and on the right on YouTube is quite significant, and yet, so it's random. I think the main problem is that the standards on YouTube are random. I was worried yesterday. It's funny, and then I'll get to racism again. I was worried a little bit yesterday because I opened up my YouTube account, and this is before I knew anything about Molyneux, and I went to one of the tabs. There's a feature called Videos, and you can see all the videos that you've got lined up to be released, and you can see the videos that you've had in the past. And it's also the place where you get, Amazon tells you, YouTube tells you if it's monetized or not monetized, and all of that stuff. And almost all my videos are monetized. Once in a while, they're not monetized, but including my videos on white fragility, my videos on the racism of the anti-racists, the barbarism of the Black Lives Matter, all of those videos got monetized, right? So yesterday, I look at the page, and the page looks all messed up. Everything they used to say that it's been monetized and it's been approved has now got these weird symbols on it. The whole page looked like somebody's tinkering with my stuff. And I'm going, oh my God, I wonder if YouTube is evaluating my material and has put a hold on everything and actually released the video just to check to see if the video would populate, because I was really worried that YouTube was looking at us. And then it turned out that at about the same time, they knocked Molyneux out. So now I wonder if they really did do some kind of review of my website and some stuff was on hold kind of as it happened. But everything's fine. It might have just been a technical glitch, and within a couple of hours, everything was fine. My stuff is still monetized. I don't get demonetized very often. Only certain videos, like the video I did on transgender got demonetized. Videos I do on sex get demonetized. Some videos on racism, some videos on foreign policy. Foreign policy usually gets demonetized. But most of the stuff I've done recently, which has been pretty hard-hitting, I think, they've allowed to be monetized. So I'll give them credit for that. Right? Maybe they get it. Maybe somebody who at least reviews my videos gets it, that I am fundamentally anti-racist. Okay, anyway, let's talk about racism. So racism is treating somebody based on their perceived race. I don't believe there is such a thing as race. I've said this many times. I think it's just a fiction. It's meaningless. It doesn't apply to anything. It's a meaningless concept. Why have it? Because it has no use. It has no practicality. There's certain medical issues that relate to your heritage, relate to where you come from, relate to your genes. Doctors can ask you, all that information without getting information about your race, which is a completely arbitrary concept. And as I've said before, a Jew's white, a Jew's a different race, a Jew's an ethnic group, a Sephardi Jew's the same race as Ashkenazi Jews. What does that even mean? A Jews who are black Jews, are they black, or are they both, or what race is that? So race it's not overrated. It is bogus. It is a bogus idea that should be eradicated from our lexicon. The whole idea of talking about people being white, black, green, yellow, brown should be eliminated. And I have to say that when I was growing up, that's how I thought I never thought in terms of race. And Israel turns out, I didn't even know this, but I was told later, Israel turns out was quite racist. Ashkenazi Jews were pretty, treated Sephardi Jews who have darker skin pretty badly. And I didn't notice it. I'm Ashkenazi, I guess, in heritage, and I never noticed it. In that sense, I'm colorblind. I'm also, I guess, blind to some of the injustices that happen around me caused by color. But the whole issue of race, if you might have noticed, really, really, really pisses me off. There's very little issues that I get as angry as I do with race. And one of the reasons that I hate, and people have identified that I hate Trump so much, is I think that he is really emboldened, and I think that he has brought out of people the worst in them. And I think that racism, white supremacist type racism, and now the other form of racism, kind of the anti-white racism, have all been encouraged, have all done well, have all expanded, have all mushroomed with his election and his campaign and then his election. The alt-right disgusted me. And I was thinking, why does, of all the things, racism makes me so angry? And part of it is that, as Ayn Rand said, it's so damn primitive. It's of all the forms of collectivism, which is evil enough. I hate collectivism. And I grew up as a collectivist. I know what collectivism is. I used to be a collectivist. I mean, a big-time collectivist. Of all the forms of collectivism, it is the most primitive, the most ugly, the most stupid, and it really is disgusting. And so I think part of it is that. But there is a part of it that's personal. And that is, I grew up one generation removed from the Holocaust. That is, the parents of friends of mine were Holocaust survivors. My parents were not Holocaust survivors because they were lucky enough not to be born in Europe. But if they had been born in Europe, given the years that they were born, they would have been probably victims of the Holocaust, not survivors. But if they had lived, they would have been Holocaust survivors. There was no alternative unless you were born in a part of Europe the Nazis didn't get to, which is very small parts of Europe. So I grew up in Israel in the 1960s and 70s with the Holocaust everywhere. Movies about the Holocaust, stories about the Holocaust, songs about the Holocaust, sad songs, stories, books, novels, everything, constant. And a day every year where you commemorate the Holocaust, where everything shuts down in the country and you basically commemorate the Holocaust and that's all you do. And to me, the Holocaust is the symbol of what happens with racism. Now, it's 6 million people slaughtered because they're different in ethnicity, whatever the hell that means. They self-identified as Jews, or they weren't even self-identified as Jews. Many of them who were killed in the Holocaust didn't consider themselves Jewish, but were identified by the Nazis as having Jewish blood or Jewish genes or whatever you want to call it. So I grew up with this vicious, evil example of the consequences of racism. And it suddenly stuck with me, right? It's part of what I associate with any form of racism. And then as I grew older, and particularly when I came to the U.S. and learned about racism and the details about racism and how disgusting and awful, evil and awful it is, it just expanded my view of how horrific, how evil, how disgusting this idea is. And of course, I've been an objectivist, a student of objectivism since I was 16, so that completely integrated with my view of individualism, my view of egoism, my view of reality, of reason. Racism is the opposite of everything I believe in. It goes against my epistemology in the sense that all human beings are capable of reason, and you should judge the truth by reason. It's opposed to my morality because I am an egoist, an individualist, and I believe I want to be treated as an individual, and I will treat other people as individuals, not members of some arbitrary group. They had no say in joining. And I'm opposed to it politically because I do believe all men are equal in rights, equal in liberty, equal in the right to life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness. It's completely arbitrary. You don't decide where you come from. You don't decide your ethnic. It's a completely arbitrary feature of who you are, of who you look like. But who you are, I mean, the fact that you have a certain color skin is arbitrary in a sense that it has no say No implication on who you are, because who you are is what you make of yourself. You are not the color of your skin. You are not the heritage of your parents. You are not the product of your genes. And you are not the product even necessarily of the culture in which you grew up in. And it's not a matter of the interaction between your genes and the environment. And this is what makes Ayn Rand radical. She is not a determinist of any kind. And yet almost all intellectuals today, almost all of them, are determinists. And this is why the ground is so fertile for the racists to come out. Because almost everybody is a determinist. And Ayn Rand says, no. You can observe the fact that you have free will. Free will is directly observable, just like the evidence of your senses is. Try to ask questions about the three topics. The three topics, I know everybody wants, it's interesting. When I talk about economics, everybody asks me about race, IQ, and immigration. When I talk about race, IQ, and immigration, everybody wants to talk to me about Peter Schiff and economics. And I appreciate that you're putting money in the question, and I will answer it. But please try, at least in the beginning, to ask questions. And I know many of you disagree with me, for example, in immigration. So ask me the questions you disagree about. You disagree with me about IQ. Ask me the questions about IQ. If I don't cover something, ask me to cover it. That's how we get more, that's how we expand the knowledge base, is if you push me on things that you think I'm wrong about while I'm talking. But if you distract me with things that are over here, then I'm going to be superficial about the things I'm talking about and jump over to talking about Peter Schiff. Again, I'm not trying to pick on you, Kevin, but it just struck me. So try to focus at least your initial questions on the issues that we're talking about. Now we've got Rudy Giuliani. I just said try to stick to questions on the topic we're talking about, and we're off to Rudy Giuliani. I don't know. Today's going to be a fun show. So racism, from a fun show to racism. So racism, in my mind, is evil, despicable ideology in every form that it has. And anybody who advocates for establishing racial identities is deplorable and horrific. So when some of you argue for race realism, that's just racism. That's just an attempt to separate the races, to identify people by their race and by the average of their race, and to stamp them with an IQ on their forehead based on the average IQ of that race. And it's disgusting. It's the Star of David on your shirt to identify you as Jewish during Hitler's Germany. It is to treat blacks as subhuman and put them into slavery because you think they're subhuman. It's to treat the Chinese when they first emigrated into this country as subhuman. Any attempt to identify people and separate them out and try to identify their traits based on the color of their skin or based on their genetics is racism and evil. I mean, their group genetics. And should be shunned and should be identified for what it is. And I don't care if you happen to be black, white, Hispanic, fill in the blank, I don't know, Asian, whatever. It doesn't matter. If you're starting to identify people and self-identify based on your genetic heritage, then I find that despicable. And I've said why, because we should treat people as individuals. You're a self-made soul. You make yourself. You're not determined by your genes. I can't say much more than that. And read Ayn Rand's essay on racism. And if you still advocate for that, then just go away. Because I have Nothing to do with you. Here's one of them, all right? Valuing race is valuing an extension of your family, historically distinct and shared bloodline. And why would you value that? There's nothing to value in that. There's no contribution to your life that your bloodline provides to you. I mean, I get that doing a family tree is kind of cool, but if you happen to have an ancestor who achieved something, and you probably do because we all do, because if you draw the bloodlines, the family tree back enough, you know, given survival bias, somebody famous will be in your family tree. What relevance is that to you? He's achieved something, not you. He succeeded, not you. You are still nobody. Even if your great-grandfather was a great entrepreneur or great innovator, you are nothing until you achieve something. There is no connection of value between you and your ancestor. It's kind of interesting, but nothing beyond that. And people who just happen to share your color of your skin who achieved something, what the hell? Who are you to claim credit for somebody else because you happen to share an insignificant feature with them? And the fact that you are a child of this person and not of that person, great-grandchild, is insignificant. It means nothing. Objectively, it has no weight. It has no value. It contributes, and this is the important thing about value, it contributes nothing to your life. Nothing. My great most famous ancestor I have, according to one family tree, one of my cousins did, is one of the rabbis who established the Hasidic movement. You know, the guys who wear black and in New York and in Israel, and who dressed like they did 200 years ago, and who super religious and super barbaric and super primitive. If you watched the movie Orthodox, was it Orthodox? What was that movie that I recommended? The TV series on Netflix I recommended not long ago. Anyway, you'd see what they look like. So what does that mean to me? Well, nothing. I hate those guys. I have no connection to them. I don't care one iota about them, other than I hate their philosophy, I hate their way of life, I hate everything about them. The fact that one of my ancestors did this, started this, means nothing. What, do I feel guilt about it? I should feel guilty because one of my ancestors did this. The series is called Unorthodox, and I highly recommend it. It's very good. So what does it mean? Nothing. That you come from a particular bloodline. It's collectivism. It's been ingrained in you, and it was ingrained in me. I, for a long time, viewed myself as a member of, very much important to me, as a member of the, Jewish tribe, although I never took that too much seriously. I was more of an Israeli tribe. I was a nationalist more than I was a Jewish thing. Because I remember when I was 12, I told my parents that if I fell in love with an Arab Muslim girl, I would marry her. And my parents were shocked, right? They were so upset. But I was absolutely committed, even at the age of 12, to being an individualist. If I fall in love with somebody, I'm not going to marry them because of where they come from? That seemed so stupid. So no, you are who you are. You are what you make of yourself. You're not even your parents. Never mind your ancient ancestors. Taking pride in your ancestry is technically bullshit. You can only take pride in your achievement. You didn't achieve your ancestry. You cannot be free. You cannot be free of the baggage of collectivism until you really unload from yourself the collectivism. It took me a long time to get rid of my Israeli nationalism because it was so embedded in me. The culture, the songs, the stories, the memories, everything. And this is at the time of war, so it's really big. Thank you, Michael. That's really generous. And I think a round number to round it off to US dollars or something. But it took me a long time to get rid of it. I understand the appeal of collectivism, the safety you feel, the emotional warmth and satisfaction it can provide. But it's fake, and it's destructive, and it leads you down a road that is only going to destroy you. Only going to destroy you. So forget it. Forget about your family tree. You shouldn't care. Nobody cares. You are what matters, but that means that lays enormous responsibility on you. If you can't take the achievements of the group, if you can't take the achievements of the past, if you can't take the achievements of your heritage, where do you get achievement from? You have to achieve. You have to do it. You have to make it possible. All right. Somebody, let me get to that question later. You can say race isn't important, but it does exist. It doesn't. Races have different facial features, sure, but the variation, people have different facial features. All people have different features. And it's true. Some people, for some areas, have more common facial features than others. So what? Why are facial features, why does that make a difference? Why is that a category worth creating? What is the practical use of that category? The fact that people have different hair. The fact that generally Scandinavians have blonde hair. Does that make them a different race, a race of blonde-haired people? Let's say then, I don't know, Scandinavians who don't have blonde hair. Some Jews have particular sized noses. Other Jews don't. But yeah, you can sometimes tell if somebody comes from a Jewish heritage. You can usually tell if somebody comes from Scandinavian heritage. Who cares? Why is that race? They come from Scandinavian heritage, so what? And often you can't tell. I am usually confused for what? Before I had this amazing gray hair, I had brown hair with blonde streaks. Blonde hair with, I have the bone structure of what? What would you say my bone structure is if you had I could be a good German. I could be a good Scandinavian. I could be a good Aryan. What the I'm getting angry. I have to control myself, right? So no, race does not exist. I'm not Aryan. I'm not Scandinavian. And for the purpose of this discussion, I'm not Jewish. I'm Yaron, who happens to have facial features that come from generally Northern Europe, from a small community in Northern Europe in a little village. Whose women were probably raped repeatedly by Cossacks and Aryans and all kinds of things. And I have their genes in me, and that's how I got this bone structure. Who cares? What difference does it make? What scientific knowledge, what human technology, what human achievement is going to be moved forward based on that knowledge of anybody's facial features and hair color or hair texture and what that means? Race is a meaningless concept, even if you could somehow draw the lines and put us all in boxes. It doesn't advance human beings anywhere. It is meaningless. Somebody else had a question like this. If race is merely a social construct, then aren't dog breeds just social construct by saying, no, because dog breeds are very different. And the very fact, again, that you would compare dogs to human beings. Somebody showed me a video. So I was doing this is good. This is a good question. So I was doing a talk for a group in Israel by Zoom. yesterday or the day before yesterday. And at the end of my talk, I did a talk on inequality. At the end of the talk, the guy said, I want to show a video and then I want to talk about the video. And he shows a video of two monkeys. And the monkeys are in cages and they're giving treats. And when one monkey is not given a treat and the treat is given to the other monkey, the one monkey gets all upset and really mad and jealous. And the guy at the end stops and he says, well, doesn't this prove that jealousy is ingrained in us? And I said, no, it proves nothing, absolutely nothing. Because you cannot learn anything by studying about human beings, anything important about human beings, by studying monkeys. Yeah, dogs have different breeds because they've been designed genetically to be completely different. But dogs are deterministic animals. They are nothing but their genes. You are not a deterministic animal. You are much more than your genes. You, I repeat myself, make who you are. You create your soul, or you don't, and then you're nothing. Which unfortunately, many people, that's what happens to them. So yeah, people have different genes. But first, the differences between human beings are not the same as the differences between dog breeds. Get a life. And then dog breeds are deterministic, and human beings are not. So you are not your genes. Can you not acknowledge that race is real and treat people as individuals? Why do they have to be mutually exclusive? Maybe they don't have to be, but since race is not real, why should we acknowledge its reality? So I deal in facts. And I don't multiply concepts when they're not needed. There is no need for the concepts of racial identity. There is no need for the concept of racial identity. There's a need for describing people. Like he's black, he's white. You know, the guy who just dropped his wallet is black. I'll go find him so I can give him the wallet. It's a description. She was blonde. She's got green eyes. He's got blue, whatever. Beyond descriptive, there is no purpose, no value, nothing achieved by identifying people as race. So it's true. Theoretically, you could create a world in which race is real and you still treat people like individuals. But it's not just about racism. It's about, you know, you don't create, there's no reason to have a concept if the concept is not useful. The difference of race can be medically relevant, though. Yeah, the concept of genetic makeup is relevant. The concept of where you come from in the world is relevant. That's not a race issue. For example, Ashkenazi Jews, particular genetic makeup, who come from, with particular genetic heritage, who come from, and Jews are not a race, by the way. I don't know what they are. It's an ethnic group. I don't know what it is. Who come from Western Europe happen to have certain diseases that others don't. Including, by the way, Sephardic Jews, who are also Jews, but who don't have these particular medical issues. Fine. There's no problem in identifying that by asking people what their bloodline is, where they come from, what their history is, without having a concept of race, which means nothing anyway, because you can't draw the lines. What if I'm half Ashkenazi and half Sephardi, or half black and half white, or quarter Irish and a quarter Scandinavian and a quarter something else? And a quarter nothing, I guess. I missed a quarter. So, no, there are other ways, in particular given the evil history of racism, given the evil history of identifying people based on their race and what it has done to people. Why would you even go there? Let's find a different way to communicate the same information. The information that's useful for medical reasons. If we're so smart, why are these all people white? I don't know what all people are. I don't know what that means, Derek. Sorry. And I don't know if they're white. I don't know what they are, and I don't care. If you really intellectual cared about this topic, why not debate a race realist or nationalist? Because I view this topic as so despicable and so beneath contempt and so irrelevant to the world. All I'm trying to do is to arm the rest of you with some information so when you encounter racists, I hope I contribute to how you think about them. But no, I would never get on a stage with a race realist. There's certain ideas that are so disgusting, that are so low, that are so anti-life. As Ayn Rand said, racism is the most primitive form of collectivism. Now, the other collectivists I won't get on stage with. I won't get on stage with a communist. And to me, it's so obvious communism is bad. Why would I want to? Right? I won't get on stage with a communist, and I won't get on stage with a racist. I won't get on stage with Noam Chomsky. I won't give those ideas the credence of debating them. I'll rile against them, but I won't debate them as if there's an alternative position that's legit that we can debate. We can debate, and as we'll see, we can debate IQ and what it means. We can debate immigration. We can't debate racism. Race realism is not a legitimate point of view in any way, shape, or form, and therefore I will not debate it. Now, will I debate a nationalist? Absolutely. I've offered to debate Yoram Hazony, who wrote the book The Virtue of Nationalism, which is a big, he is the organizer of the whole national conservative movement, the National Conservative Conference. He's a big shot in the American nationalist movement. I've offered to debate him. If he's I don't think he's a racist, although there's elements of, maybe there are elements there, I don't know. Right? So I have no problem debating nationalism because I think nationalism is a real idea. There's something to be discussed. I think it's a bad idea, but it's a real idea. Racism is so low that it's not worthy of discussion. Not worthy of debate. Sorry, it's worthy of discussion because you have to arm yourself against the evil, but not worthy of debate. Does a sense of weakness in one's independent reasoning skills lead to wanting to predict human behavior by race? Yeah, and I think it's you wanting to belong. You wanting to belong. It's you afraid of standing alone. This is why the bloodline is so important. The whole issue of bloodline is so important. You need a group to support your standing in this world. It's a lack of self-esteem. It's a lack of weakness of independent thought. It's a lack of ability to think for yourself, which requires you to, get a group together. That's I think the psychological source. It's weakness. It's emotionalist. It's a lack of respect for your own reason and a lack of belief in your own ability to think for yourself. Some will acknowledge that being colorblind is ideal, but you have to temporarily put on hold to address problems specific to black people first. But once you put that on hold and you address problems specific to black people, you are going to engage in racism. Racism against non-black people or racism against black people themselves. You're going to create resentment. The only way to address specific problems that relate to black people is to be colorblind. And then look at specific issues relating to specific individuals in specific contexts. Yeah, somebody writes, thank you for being a voice for what should be obvious in these times. Yes, not just these times, a long time ago. It saddens me to see racism become so popular. It's terrible, and it's left and right. Right? As I've done my shows on racism on the left, it's left and right. It's everybody. And those of us, and then some people who say, I want to be colorblind, then they're accused of being racist for claiming to be colorblind. We should abandon race completely. I am not white in any significant sense. Yeah, my color skin is white, but I'm not a white person. I'm not defined by being white. I defined racism at the beginning. It's treating people not based on who they are as individuals, but based on their membership in a group. That is racism. All right, the left complains about differences in racial outcome. How do you address them without analyzing group stats by race, saying nothing about individuals? Well, the fact that the left complains about differences in racial outcomes doesn't mean that you should address racial outcomes. You can address them through culture. You can address them through neighborhoods. You can address them, and this is how I would address them, as yes, by emphasizing race, left, and I'm talking to the left now, by emphasizing race, you have isolated the members of people who happen to have black skin, have created a culture that is unhealthy, and a culture that has embraced victimhood, and a culture that does not allow you to, as individuals, to rise up above it. And not identifying race doesn't mean you don't identify racism. So you can say, and part of the consequences of people with black skin not being successful, or one of the causes of that, is, let's say, a history of racism in this country. That doesn't accept race other than to identify that some people accept race, and the fact that they accept race has caused people who happen to have black skin problems throughout history, or throughout the last 200-300 years. Yeah, I like this. Racism is the notion of ascribing value to a person or disvalue to a person based on body chemistry rather than who they are. That's from Ayn Rand. And I encourage you to read her essay on racism. Thank you, Benji. So there are plenty of ways to acknowledge the fact that people have black skin there are certain issues, and then address those issues without assuming that the fact that they have black skin leads them to whatever it's the black skin led them to. It's not, but other people treat them so. I don't consider myself. I often say I don't consider myself a Jew, except and Ayn Rand said this. I'm stealing this from Ayn Rand, except in the face of anti-Semitism. If you're going to be an anti-Semite, suddenly you become very Jewish. But I don't recognize the idea that Jewish means anything as a positive or as a negative. It means something only in combating your bigotry. Okay, let's see. Would you elaborate on what you mean when you say race doesn't exist? I think I have. There are physical differences, e.g. skin color. Yes, so there are people with different skin color. Great. So what? Of course, it's morally irrelevant, but it's more than morally irrelevant. It's almost irrelevant to anything. It's medically irrelevant. How dark your skin is medically relevant. And the gradations of dark skin. And different cultures, by the way, different places define the black race differently. So, for example, in America, if you have a little bit of black in you, heritage of somebody with black skin, you are considered part of the black race. In Brazil, if you have a little bit of white in you, you're considered to be part of the white race. It's completely arbitrary. It's completely arbitrary. How many white ancestors do you have to be white? How many black ancestors do you need to have to be black? Is the fact that so many slave owners had raped their slaves and had children with them, does that make the children Less black, more white, half race this, half race that? Or does the black dominate? Because many, I don't know if most, but many blacks in America are a result of a black slave being raped by a white slave owner. What is that? What does that constitute? How do you define them? Now in America, we define them as black. Why? Because we've been racists. Because they tend to have darker skin, but not as dark as others. By the way, even in primitive cultures, in other cultures, in Asia, in Africa, they discriminate there. You know, other cultures can be racist too, and not claiming it's not a Western invention, right? Like in Thailand, the darker your skin, the worse people treat you. They're Thais. They're all Thais. They're all basically the same genes, but some have darker skin, some have lighter skin. Darker skin means you're poor, you're from the north, you're probably less educated, and therefore we treat you like shit. Right? Yes, what Ayn Rand said about racists being the most, not mediocre people, I think it's worse than mediocre, is most apparent now, yes. You're denial of influence of genetics is mystical and scientific. That's not true. You are the mystic. You're the mystic of material, the mystic of muscle, as Ayn Rand defined it. You are not a product of your genes. Genes influence you. Sure they do. They influence your medicine. They influence your intelligence. We'll get to that. They influence your capacities. But they don't influence who you are. And the fact that your genetics do that don't mean your race does that. Again, what does race have anything to do with it? And how do you define the races? And who are the races? And how many grandparents do you have to have? If they're mixed races, which one counts? Which one is more powerful? Which one means more? I mean, just think these things through. And you don't have an answer to them. You don't have an answer to them. Because you guys are racists. What you need is the pseudo self-esteem given to you by thinking, oh, I'm white, I've got a higher IQ than black people. Ooh. And hey, I've got all these pals over here. They're all the same color as me. Isn't that cool? Yeah, we have different skin tones. We have different hair texture. We have different eye shapes. So what? And how much of an eye shape, how much of a skin tone, how much of a color does it take to become a member of a race? It's just a meaningless, stupid concept. Enough. All right, let's see a few of these. You're assuming a universalistic worldview that comes from Christianity and Plato. I'm assuming of a universalistic worldview. I don't think it only comes from Christianity and Plato. It certainly comes from Aristotle. It comes from anybody who believes in human nature and believes that we have a nature and believes that they are absolutes and believes that those absolutes apply to all people. Reason is man's basic means of survival, applies to all human beings. That's not from Plato, believe me. And that's not certainly not from Christianity. But I am a universalist in the sense that I believe that the same morality, the same basic principles apply to all human beings. They don't apply to animals, they apply to all human beings. We're not apes, we're not monkeys, we're human beings. There's a big evolutionary leap between monkeys or apes and human beings. And human beings have free will. We create our own souls. We create our own destiny. We are who we are as individuals. We're not a product of our genes. Wow. Do you think Ayn Rand's depiction of Arabs as savage on Donahue was consistent with their anti-determinist stance? Yes. It was within a context. It was in a context of the struggles in the Middle East. It was the context of the struggles between Israel and the Palestinians and the Arab nations around it. It was in the context of culture, not of genes. Let me say now, I think lots of cultures in the world are savage, barbaric, primitive. But I don't differentiate those by race. It's by culture. Arabs in a different era were the height of civilization, were the most sophisticated people in the world for hundreds of years. It has everything to do with ideas and culture, not genes. Those same Arabs, in a different circumstances, could achieve great things, and Ayn Rand certainly wouldn't have denied that. All right, I answered that one. Lots of questions, so hold on the question for a little bit. Let me catch up. Oh, another one. All right, but that's a good amount of money. Let's see. You mentioned several throughout the show, but it would be great if you would summarize the challenge question. Rational people can ask others who speak in terms of race. The challenge questions. Wow, I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that. I mean, I would ask them why it's important to them, what it actually means, yeah, let me think about that. I don't have a list of questions, although I've obviously said, so I'm sure if somebody did a quick kind of scan of the thing, they could pull out the things that would challenge somebody about racism. But the main thing is do you believe, this is the key question I think to ask, do you believe people have free will? If you don't, then I kind of understand racism. We're just product of our genes, and then it's important to figure out where the genes come from and what's the origin of them, and then that'll determine who my character is. But if you believe in free will, then on what basis would one even be, what one would value race? As part of the historical records, so we never forget evils of the past, is there a case to be made for keep a status up just like we did for Holocaust? Statues up? Yes, it depends on where. I think you put up statues in museums. And if you're going to put up statues to remind people of the history, you don't put up statue of General Lee riding a horse victoriously. You'd put up a statue of a slave struggling to be free. I mentioned this on a show, and I showed a photo of one of my favorite sculptures is in the Louvre of Spartacus, a slave breaking his chains and struggling for freedom. That is the kind of sculpture, that is the kind of celebration, that is the kind of memorial you want to have to remind you of the past. But sculptures of Lee and other historical figures, put them in a museum. Stick them in some historical museum. You don't put them out in public to celebrate. Sculptures are celebrations when they're put out in public. The things to commemorate. The things to commemorate in a positive way. Or to remember an injustice, but not by portraying the person who inflicted the injustice. It's by portraying the person who suffered the injustice. So memorials to the Holocaust. Don't have Hitler riding a horse or riding his Volkswagen. What you have is the victims. You're portraying the victims. So that's how I think monuments or memorials should be viewed, right? Let's see. How much worse to see racial violence getting before it begins to settle down? How much worse? I think it's going to get a lot worse. Because I think you haven't yet seen the white racism reach its apex. I think it's going to grow. I think Black Lives Matter is going to make it worse. I think it's becoming more and more and more of a part of a whole segment of American society. And I think when that gets big enough and strong enough to confront the racism of the Black Lives Matter movement, then you will get real racial violence. It's starting a little bit, and you'll get much more of it. It's in Portland, before all of these riots and everything happened, before the demonstrations happened, you had white supremacists clashing with Antifa almost every weekend. There was a period a few years ago, almost every weekend. And I think that is going to scale up and become much, much worse, unfortunately. I like the traditions of my culture. For example, opening gifts on Christmas and weekend coffee and cake with family. Are there Jewish traditions you like and celebrate? No, not really. I mean, I love opening presents on Christmas. I love having a Christmas tree. I don't have a star on top of the Christmas tree. You know, sometimes we've had a dollar sign at the top of the Christmas tree. I love the lights. I love the presents. I love the benevolence. No, I don't celebrate any Jewish traditions unless I'm in Israel with family, and then I do it because I'm with family. I'm not attached to any Jewish traditions. My children were not raised with any Jewish traditions. No, I've completely... I choose my traditions, if you will. I like Christmas, so I do Christmas. I love Thanksgiving, so I do Thanksgiving. Those are the only real 2 holidays, and 4th of July. The 3 holidays I celebrate are 4th of July, Thanksgiving, and Christmas. And I give them completely secular interpretations, and I celebrate them. All right, let's see if there's one other one on race. Jews make up 0.2% of the world's population, but 25% of the world's Nobel Prize winners. Blacks make up 13% of the population, yet 95% of the NBA. How do you know that's all cultural and no genetic base up? No one knows that. No, we know that. Of course, it's a combination of both. It's a combination of both. Right? Certainly, when it comes to NBA stars, you have to have a certain physique. You know, I don't have that physique. I don't have the height. And very few people from certain countries or certain heritages have the height. Okay, so if you're going to look for a long-distance runner, you go to Kenya or Uganda. Not blacks, you go to Kenya or Uganda. I think it's Uganda, where they really, really good long-distance running. Why? Because they have a certain ratio genetically between body mass and muscle and leanness and plus they run in high altitudes or they live in high altitudes or whatever. So there's certain characteristics that you look for. You want a basketball player. Yeah, you go to where people have the physique of a basketball player. You don't have to identify them by race to do that. There are plenty of blacks who can't play basketball. There are plenty of blacks who are too short to play basketball. The whole tribes in Africa that are very short. So, yeah, you use that. Now, why do Jews have world's Nobel Prize winners? Jews have cultivated that. And some of that is genetic. There's no question. But a lot of that is cultural. And some of it is genetic. But there's the difference. Here's the difference. And this is an important point, both about the NBA and about Nobel Prizes. There are lots of people with the genes similar to LeBron James. Lots of people with black skin who have very similar physiques to LeBron James. But LeBron James is the best basketball player in the world, and they are not. Why? Because he added something to it. And I don't think it's culture. I think it's his choices, his dedication, his commitment, his competitiveness. If you watch the series of Michael Jordan, that's a special human being. Special human being. Irrespective of the genes that made him athletic, there are lots of people who have that athleticism built into their genetic makeup. Right? So, it's him. LeBron James created himself as a great basketball player. Every single player in the NBA, whatever color skin they have, whatever athletic ability they have, they had to have certain genes. That was a starting point. But then, what made them superstars? It was them. Their choices, their work ethic, their dedication, their competitiveness. The same with the Nobel Prizes for Jews. Lots of people in the world are super smart. Lots of people in the world are super smart. But some people, partially maybe because of culture, and partially, significantly because of the choices they make, elevate themselves, use what genes have given them to make themselves superstars. That's true in the NBA. For example, culture plays a role. So you could be born with a great physique to play basketball in certain countries, but they don't have basketball courts. So you're never going to play basketball. You're never going to practice as a young person, and you're never going to be good at it, even though you have a great physique. You have Michael Jordan's physique. You have plenty of kids who are born with the IQ of an Albert Einstein, who, because of the culture they're born into, will never be Albert Einstein. So culture plays a role. Then on top of culture, you have choices. There are plenty of kids who have the right culture, who have the right genes, and never make the right choices to be a superstar in science, to be a superstar in basketball, to be a superstar in anything else. So there are three elements here. And to be a superstar, all of them have to align. Yes, genes contribute. Culture contributes. And then you have to make the most of that culture and those genes. And that's what's important. And in Jewish culture, studying matters. Getting good grades matters. Being smart and showing that you're smart through education matters. It's the whole reward system in that culture is built around that. So if you're born with high intelligence, if you're born with the genes, with a high-powered motor up here, you've got a culture that supports that, encourages that in pursuit, and then you have to engage it. So none of that contradicts the idea that there's no such thing as genes, and it's irrelevant to know if somebody's a Jew or not. What you want to know is, are they smart, and are they committed? And do they have the potential of being a superstar? That's all. Do you think religionist Whittaker Chambers thought of gas chambers when he read Atlas Shrugged because it depicts love for living on earth? I think he thought of gas chambers because of his hatred of the individual and his hatred of reason. And yes, because Atlas Shrugged depicts the beauty of living as an individual. Are we a product of our metaphysics? I'm not sure what that means. No, we're a product of our choices. Choices are our metaphysics, so yes, but metaphysics not in the sense of physics, in the sense of metaphysics, in the sense of our nature. Our nature is that we have free will. Our nature is that we have the ability to choose. What are your thoughts on the concept of unconscious bias? Is the concept even valid? I think it probably is. I don't know that it should be called unconscious bias. I think there are certain automated knowledge that we have integrated automatically, and that we respond in certain ways, and that I think that's true of lots of things in life. And there's no reason it couldn't be true of how we relate to people of particular skin color. If you've been taught from when you're very young, black men are dangerous, and you internalize that, even if it is an adult, you come to the conclusion that is wrong, you might still have that emotion. You might still have that fast thinking or instinct, as they, that people call. And you have to undo that. That's what psychology is psychology is for, is to help us undo our unconscious biases. And those biases are in everything in our lives, not just in it. All right, I want to move on to IQ. And they're related, of course. Because the issue of IQ is ultimately a technical one. What is IQ? Does it really represent intelligence? How much of what is considered intelligence is measured by IQ? Which part of intelligence? Is intelligence a factor in determining your future? And how much of a factor is it determining your future? All fascinating, interesting questions that social scientists debate, write about, and get interested in. But the fact is that nobody cares about those issues. It's not what motivates the discussion about IQ. If you put aside Charles Murray and the bell curve and all of that, then nobody out there, none of you, I suspect, would care that much about IQ. Now, some of you would be interested in social sciences, might be interested in psychology, might be interested in the ability to predict success in the future and whether IQ measures that or doesn't measure it, and the whole intellectual, theoretical, but academic debate about intelligence and IQ, which is a robust debate that happens out there. The only reason IQ is at the forefront of the public debate is because it is used by racists to justify their racism. Now, it is true. So once that is done, it becomes an interest for those of us who are not racists, who want to protect against it. Now, reading the literature of IQ is difficult because it deals with specific psychological methodology, how you construct tests and what those tests evaluate. So I'm trying to break this down for you now, right? What is the test? What does it actually measure? And what does it actually predict? And then it deals with a whole world of statistics. It deals with how significant a correlation there is between performance in the test and future performance in activities in life. Between taking the test once, taking it twice, taking it 3 times, and the deviation across tests. There are massive, intricate issues regarding just the statistics and the statistic validity of any inferences that have been generated by IQ tests. Now, people here claim they know everything there is to know about IQ. But I bet you none of you, other than listening to Charles Murray or a few other, or some others, or certainly Molyneux and some racists, discuss this, know nothing about IQ. Know nothing about the debate around IQ. Know nothing about statistics. I know you know nothing about statistics because statistics is hard. I mean, almost nobody gets statistics on the coronavirus, never mind statistics about IQ. You know nothing about actual analysis. You maybe have read a Wikipedia page on IQ, and that's it. You think you're experts. And now you can say the different races have different IQs, and you know exactly what that means. You know nothing. So it is stunning to me how uncritical people are about what they know and what they don't know. What are they actually holding and what they don't hold? What is actually true and what's not true? I mean, I know something about statistics. I don't consider myself an expert in statistics, but I know more statistics than certainly the average person and almost anybody who's not a statistician, who's not studied intensely statistics. I did econometrics. I run regressions. I run sophisticated econometric models. I know how to do this stuff. Not an expert, but I know how to do this stuff. I know how to interpret it somewhat. I'm not an expert. Stats are hard. And yet, all of you know with certainty that IQ represents what you think it represents. How do you know that? Just epistemologically. How do you know that? Because you read an article? What about the 20 articles that contradict that? So it's unbelievable to me. Now, IQ tests were designed to test certain skills. And they do a good job in testing the skills that the test was designed to test. And if you check to see, if you score high on an IQ test, if you execute on the skills that it tests for, yeah, there's a good correlation there. But we've taken a test that was designed to test for certain skills. And by the way, skills that have nothing to do with thinking outside the box, with innovating, with being creative, with actually thinking, but more skills that have to do with a certain regimented way of looking at things and being a bureaucrat, really. IQ tests to a large extent test that. And we've turned it into the test of intelligence. I don't know about most, many people within the field are skeptical. Think there are other ways to measure intelligence, or that IQ measures some aspect of intelligence, but not all of it. But then there's this other interesting factor. generally, most of you and I are very skeptical of what comes out of the social sciences, very skeptical of psychologists, very skeptical of some of these psychological experiments and the results that they generate. But for some reason, you guys believe completely everything they tell you about IQ. You don't agree with their politics. You don't agree with other psychological things that they advocate for. But IQ, you believe. Why? Because it happens, the way the bell curve is structured, the argument in the bell curve is structured, that it reinforces your priors, that it supports your racist views. It supports your racist views. That's why you believe it. Not because you know it, not because you've studied it, not because you understand it, but because you support it. Now, I am not a master of statistics, but Nassim Taleb, who wrote The Black Swan, who I disagree with fundamentally on a lot of issues, and who generally is a jerk, is just not a nice person, is a genius statistician. And he's got an essay out there criticizing IQ tests from every single dimension. It doesn't, IQ tests, he shows statistically only are good at measuring who has very low intelligence. But once you get over like 90, they lose all significance. The difference between 90 and 100 and 100 and 120 are meaningless statistically. The one thing that IQ results seem not to be able to predict. So there's a lot of literature about IQ tests, and Jordan Peterson quotes this. IQ tests predict success in life. Well, one measure of success in life IQ can't predict, which is interesting. Of all the things in success in life that IQ supposedly predict, the one that they can't is the one we can actually measure. Wealth. When you actually run a regression of wealth versus IQ, there's no correlation. There's no correlation. So, I'm dubious about IQ. I always have been. I'm not dubious about intelligence. I'm not dubious about the fact that some of us are more intelligent than others. I'm not even dubious about the fact that we're born with different levels of intelligence. And let me just say one thing about the bell curve. The bell curve takes racial groups. I don't know what that even means because I don't believe there is such thing as race. And then it calculates an average IQ for each one of the races. It shows, for example, Ashkenazi Jews, my people, are the smartest. So you should just listen to me because I represent the smartest people on planet Earth. So you should just accept everything that I tell you. I don't know, East Asians are next, whites are next, Hispanics and blacks have the lowest IQ. But even in the bell curve, that's just averages. And there are many reasons why that study is unbelievably flawed. Unbelievably flawed. The differences between individuals within the group are dramatically larger than the differences between the averages. So it makes no difference in evaluating specific people. Yeah, the insults are already coming. It makes no difference for anything in life what your group's IQ is. The only thing that matters is what your IQ is. It doesn't matter for anything in life. In assessing an individual's intelligence, what his group's IQ is, if IQ is important. It only matters what that individual's IQ is. And that's not even important because IQ does not represent. People say, straw man you're on. Every time I say something you disagree, straw man you're on. What is a straw man? Explain. Ask a super chat question. Explain. Challenge me. But you can't. Or you can shout it, straw man, straw man. Where's the straw man? And the fact is that I know, and I've said this many times, know many people who are born with very high intelligence who are idiots. And people who are born with very low intelligence who are incredibly successful and brilliant. I know people with high IQ who are pretty dumb when it comes to a lot of things. Low IQ who are really smart when it comes to other things. Yeah, I know he's accusing me of a fallacy, but which one? IQ correlates heavily with strong success factors. Only success factors that are not measurable. I mean, as Nassim Taleb documents in his essay, and you should go read it, the one thing that's measurable is wealth, and it doesn't correlate with wealth. And even when it correlates with other important successes, because I've seen Jordan Peterson, even when it correlates with other important successes, it correlates weakly. It doesn't explain a lot. Maybe it explains 20%. Okay, 20% is a lot. But what about the other 80%? Why isn't that important? Oops, what did I do? You only focus on the 20% because, again, yeah, Ed Locke has as a concept of working intelligence. The whole idea of boiling intelligence down to one number is bullshit. It's unscientific. It's complete and utter nonsense. And you guys should stop doing it. If you want to be a racist, be a racist. Don't pretend to be a scientific one, because the science is not there. As Michael writes, as an employer, I couldn't care less about IQ. When hiring, I use my best objective analysis to choose people who will produce. I don't even care about education because my best salespeople never went to university. Absolutely. And I think today the truth is, same is true of programmers. Charles Murray has never said you can judge an individual based on a group. I never said Charles Murray said it. I said you guys say it. Charles Murray is too good of a thinker to say that. But Charles Murray makes many errors. And it's interesting because I think Charles Murray makes many errors in many of his books, not just in that book. I disagree with Charles Murray on a lot of things. And this is one of the things I disagree with him on, even doing what he did with the bell curve. I never accused Charles Murray of saying that. You go back and listen to what I said. I said people use the bell curve to do that. All right. So the whole IQ debate is an excuse to be a racist. Some of my audience, not all of my audience. I know when I say you, I'm not talking, the people who know, the people who are not racist, who are not IQ betas, know that I'm not talking about them, I think. They've listened to me enough. All right, by the way, I've run empirics, I've run statistics, I've run regressions. You can do a lot to manipulate data if you want to get good results. To do good econometrics is hard. And I have a strong suspicion that people in the social sciences don't do good econometrics. That's part of what Nassim Taleb is saying. Econometrics is a tough field. And I'm dubious about the ability of a lot of social scientists to do it. Just me. Shout out to somebody. I'm not sure what the shout out is to. Why were Americans so much more racist in the 19th century? You have said that Americans were so much more individualistic back then. Yeah, there was definitely, Americans were definitely, it was this real struggle within America, I think, in the 19th century. On the one hand, there was this strong element of individualism, but it was bounded within certain groups, and I think it's a sad feature of America, but as America matured, it got rid of that. So certainly a lot of Americans were now racists in the North, and that's why they were willing to fight a war to end slavery. But if you think about racism in a broader sense, think about the hatred of the Irish for the Italians, and the hatred of the Italians for the Irish, and the hatred of both of those for Jews, and the gang wars that happened in New York and so on between the different ethnic groups or between the different nationalities. And over time, that went away, and people became less and less. What America infused them with, ultimately, is the individualism. And the spirit of individualism is in the founding of this country and in the spirit and the culture of this country. And in that sense, the South, which with the slavery and racism, was anti-American, anti-founding fathers. And I'm going to have Brad Thompson on the show on Saturday to talk a little bit about that. We talked about it when we talked about his book. But the South was very European and very racist. And that somehow racism, there was always this tension, always this conflict between individualism inherent in the founding of the country and the racism that was part of the founding of the country. And that continued through the 19th century and to some extent continues today. Some extent continues today. Yeah, Alex, right? Alex, I just picked this up off of Alex. It's nicely put. IQ measures a particular set of cognitive abilities. It doesn't mean you're stupid. It just measures proficiency at specific mental exercises. Absolutely. And you shouldn't, and then there's the whole issue of wisdom. Intelligence should not be confused with wisdom. There's a whole spectrum of even what intelligence constitutes, and it constitutes more than what IQ measures. All right, finally, oh my God, we've got immigration now. How are we going to do immigration? I don't know how we do immigration. By the way, one of the things that got me angry about this racism thing and why I brought it up today, I was doing this thing I told you about, the monkeys, this thing for a group of Israelis. And one of the people listening in was a guy from Hungary, I think Jewish guy from Hungary. And in the Q&A, he starts advocating for racism. He's Jewish. And what he's arguing for is the superiority of Ashkenazi Jews. Wow. Do you consider Peikoff a racist, thinking back to what was said in the debate with the two of you on immigration? Absolutely not. And nothing he said during that debate, would constitute racism. You can have objections to immigration that are not racist. And his objections were not racist. So no. And Leonard is a good friend and my mentor and my teacher, and no, absolutely not. Okay, so let me just say, and that blew my mind. A Jewish racist who thinks everybody else is beneath him. You think Jews would know better. You'd think. All right. Immigration. So there were a lot of objections to immigration. I don't think any of them stand up to the facts. And I don't think any of them, but some of them are more reasonable than others. I do think, however, that much of the objections to immigration comes from racism. That's kind of the theme. It comes from xenophobia. It comes from the dislike of those who look differently than us. There's very little discussion of immigration from Europe. There's very little discussion, disagreement about European immigrants. And this has been true, again, for a very long time. The first anti-immigration bill was passed in the 19th century, in the late 19th century, 1890s, to specifically exclude Chinese. And then later on, immigration bills tried to exclude Southern Europeans, including Jews. And later on, in the 60s, when it was recognized that past immigration bills were pro-European, anti-other nationalities, the 1960s immigration bill tried to balance it out by swaying more favorably towards, let's say, Hispanics. People come from Latin America. But our immigration policies have always been influenced by race. They've always been racist. And there's no question in my mind that our immigration policies today are, that those, not everybody, but those many people who want to restrict immigration are motivated by racial issues. And the loudest voices against immigration are the voices of the racists. They don't want people who look differently than them in this country. Now, I've said what I've said about racism, so I think that's enough. So I won't talk more about it. I think that's a despicable, disgusting reason. I'm not saying that Americans are racist. I'm saying that a lot, because I don't think all Americans are anti-immigration, but I think a lot of the anti-immigration people are anti-immigration because they don't like to see a bunch of brown people cross the border. And then they're much more favorable towards Europeans coming, even if they're coming illegally. Much more favorable to illegal European immigrants. And a lot of them, by the way. A lot of them. They just do it differently. Most illegal immigrants in the United States, this is a fact, you can check it out. You can check it out in the government websites. Most illegal immigrants to the United States come here with a legal visa and overstay their visa. They overstay their visa. It's not true that most illegal immigrants cross the border at night, smuggled in. Now, there are other objections to immigrations, to, more immigration, open immigration. One is the economy. It will hurt the economy. How? It'll take jobs from Americans. So first, let's separate out jobs from the economy. There is no case, economic case, right? No more super chat questions unless they are on the issue of immigration. I don't want to see anything else because I'm not going to answer it. There's just not enough time. And I know people disagree with you on immigration, so ask away. Ask me about all the things you've been wanting to ask me, Israel and Muslims and all that stuff. Ask me. Now's your chance. There is no basis for an argument that immigration hurts the economy. From a purely economic perspective, GDP growth, innovation, economic growth, economic success, immigration is a huge plus. Immigration is a huge benefit to the economy. Massive. And, if I had the time, I could prove that to you mathematically. More immigrants is more minds thinking about more problems, solving more problems, consuming more goods, but more importantly, producing more goods, creating more jobs. But what about the jobs of Americans? Oh my God, we need to protect those poor Americans. And does immigration lower wages? No. Not in the long run. It does in the short run for particular jobs. But in the long run, it doesn't. Almost all studies show that in the long run, wages don't move much when you have lots of immigrants. Well, we got more racists. Here's a good example, right? More Somali minds. Well, one of the most brilliant women I know is a black Somali. Her name is Ayan Hirsi Ali. She's one of the bravest, smartest, most courageous women you will ever meet. So yeah, you can latch on the Somali label and pretend that means anything. You disgusting racist. Yeah, she's Somali. So, and she's a hero. We need more Somali minds. Absolutely. No, she's married. She's married to another amazing guy, Niall Ferguson, who is a historian and a really good thinker. I don't agree with him on everything. I don't agree with Ayn Hirsi Ali on everything. And he's an immigrant to the United States. He happens to have immigrated here from the United Kingdom. He's white, she's black. How does that fit into some of y'all's worldview? I'm not sure. Both immigrants, and are married. I'm speaking from a gated community. Actually not. I live in a condominium in Puerto Rico. What gated community? See, these are the kind of arguments people have against me. It's not Yaron's wrong because of fact 1, 2, 3. It's Yaron lives in a gated community when I don't. I'm speaking from my condominium in Puerto Rico. All right, I'm gonna do this. I think we're gonna have our 3-hour show today. Jobs. Long-term wages go up, not down. Long-term GDP goes up, not down. Quality of life, standard of living goes up, not down. The things the immigrant produces, if their wages are lower, then cost less for you. So as a consumer, your quality of life goes up, not down. Immigrants are massive plus, not minus, to economic success. But you say, we have a welfare state. And Milton Friedman once said, you can't have open immigration if you have a welfare state. Well, I hate to say it, but even Milton Friedman was wrong sometimes. And you can see this by asking the person who says to you, well, what about the welfare state? Say, okay, so we'll eliminate the welfare state. Are you okay with open immigration then? And of course they're going to say no. Of course they're going to say no. So, yeah, the welfare state is problematic. I'd love to see the passion, the energy of the anti-immigration people deployed to getting rid of the welfare state. I wish all those conservatives who want to stop immigration devoted the same attention, the same energy to getting rid of welfare. But they don't care about the welfare state. What they don't want is immigrants. And on top of that, immigrants are generally good for the welfare state. Because immigrants, not like Americans, not like people born in America, actually come to this country to work. They come to this country because they know what poverty looks like. And they come to this country to make a better life for themselves. So they tend to get jobs. They tend to work. They tend to pay into the welfare state and support Americans who grew up with all of this and still managed to screw up and land on the rolls of welfare. Who do you think is worse? An immigrant who comes here grew up in horrible conditions and come here and maybe lands up on welfare, or an American who grew up with this and lands up on welfare? I resent the American much more than I resent the immigrant. All right, then there's culture. Somebody asked a question about this. Do you differentiate between racism and the conservative objection to immigrants based on alleged culture degradation? Yes and no. I think there is a cultural question you can ask. I think it's often just a disguise for racism. But you can ask the question. Yes, people bring their culture with them. And yes, their cultures are not as good as ours. I am not a multiculturalist. I believe our culture is better. But what conservatives ignore they choose to ignore, is that if our culture is so much better, which it is, why are we afraid of their bad culture? Why can't we just get them to convert to ours? And maybe the first generation won't. Maybe the first generation, they'll have their culture. They'll have their music. They'll have their food. They'll have their attitudes. Maybe make a law that the first generation immigrants can never vote. But why should the second generation have that culture? If we truly believe in our culture is superior, if we truly believe that our culture is right, good, virtuous, noble, why don't we embrace them into the melting pot? Why don't we make them part of the melting pot? Why don't we teach them our culture? Well, we don't because of multiculturalism. But who invented multiculturalism? Was it immigrants or was it Americans? Who are the lefties who undermine America? Who are the lefties who teach that America is a bad country, that the American culture is bad? Who? Immigrants? No, Americans. So why are you blaming the immigrants? Why don't we assimilate? Why don't we demand assimilation? Why don't we expect assimilation? I've spoken about this many times. You know, when I was sworn in as an American citizen in 2003, George Bush was president. And he comes up on the big screen in this hall with thousands of people swearing their allegiance to America as new citizens. And he tells us we should embrace our old culture. We should teach our kids about our old culture. And what I'm thinking is, no. The reason I came to America was I don't want that old culture. Yeah, it's all about the Democratic Party. I mean, you guys, the tribalism is unbelievable. I'm not talking about political parties. I'm talking about reality, facts, logic. This is George Bush, Republican, who told me to embrace my old culture, told the thousands of people in the hall with me to embrace their old culture and teach their kids about it and not forget about it. And I'm going the exact opposite. You should demand that we assimilate. But imagine a world, would you agree? Well, we'll skip that. All right. What did I want? Okay, so culture. I believe American culture is strong enough to integrate and assimilate any culture thrown at it. Any culture thrown at it. If we're not, then it's our problem and we should get our act together. It's time to get our act together. Finally, and this was Leonard's objection, voting. Immigrants come here and they vote Democratic. And the Democrats are turning this country into a disaster. And I think the mistake there is empirical. One, most immigrants don't vote. Very few immigrants actually vote, actually go out and vote. Second, they vote Democratic for a reason, and that is because Republicans are anti-immigrants. Violently anti-immigrants. So why would they vote for somebody who's anti-them? Third, how about we pass a law that says that first-generation immigrants can't vote? Would you then allow them in? Would you then allow them in? And look, finally, the answer is none of the above. The answer to immigration is individual rights. The only job of government is to protect rights. The only job of government is to protect us from people who would violate our rights. If somebody's coming to America to work, if somebody's coming into America to take care of their life, to take care of their kids, to whatever, they're not coming here to be a criminal or a terrorist. Then how is it your business? How has the government got a say in who should come and who should not? Where's the government's role? Where's the violation of rights by somebody coming here and taking your job? You don't have a right to a job. If you got a question on Muslim immigration, ask it. So the only role of government is to protect our rights. So it should protect us from potential criminals, terrorists coming into this country. But beyond that, why is it the government's business? There's a super chat feature. You can ask a question in the super chat feature just like everybody else. Beyond that, what is the government's responsibility? If I want to go and hire a bunch of Mexicans to come and work in my factory, and I take a pickup truck and drive down to Mexico and bring them up, why is it anybody's business? How is that hurting my neighbor? And if I don't allow them to vote, well, voting shouldn't be able to negate rights, but it does today. But that's, again, not the fault of immigrants. It's the fault of Americans. They instituted those laws. So let's see if we've got some immigration questions. Do you believe your views on immigration are the most individualistic? And don't you think Latin America has a problem with collectivistic ideology? Yes, Latin America is horrifically collectivist. But the better people in Latin America, the individualists among the Latin Americans, are willing to risk their lives, are willing to travel thousands of miles to come and work in the United States. Yeah, you know, this is what I usually get. Here's somebody really smart. He's got on my chat and he says, your analysis is superficial, Mr. Brook. Well, why? Show me where it's wrong. Show me where it's wrong. Show me where it's wrong. Don't tell me it's superficial. Show me the depth. Because I can take this very deep. I can do a 3-hour show on immigration. I have answered every question anybody's ever asked me about this. I can give you facts. I can give you the empirical data. I can give you the studies. I've read the books. Where? Where's this depth that I'm missing? Show me. There's a super chat feature. You can challenge me. So it's the better people who come here. And again, it's a cultural issue. The first generation might have a difficulty with the individualistic approach. But if we have decent education in this country, if we have a decent culture in this country, they assimilate and they become more individualistic. Just like when the Irish and the Italians came to this country in the 19th century, they hated each other's guts. And over time, they assimilated. They became Americans. And the Irish didn't care that the Italian was an Italian. The Italian didn't care that the Irish was Irish. And that's the ideal. The ideal is everybody treats each other as an individual. But Latin America screwed up because of its collectivistic culture. Let's give them a way out. Let's give them an escape valve. Come to America. Thank you for fighting the racists on both sides. Taking a vacation August 1st and thinking about Puerto Rico, do you recommend? Yes, absolutely. Yeah, maybe write to me at yaronbrookshow.com rather than take up the podcast time. What about refugees? What should be the government's role in the matter of refugees? None. The government's role should be none with regard to immigrants. Somebody wants to come here in a ideal situation. As long as they're not a threat, then they can come. They don't get help from the American government. The American government doesn't subsidize their travel. The American government doesn't give them housing. It doesn't hand them a check. Come, get a job. If you don't have a job, starve. Or get private charity. Right? But the government should have no role in refugees in the sense of promoting them, supporting them, bringing them to the country, and so on. We're not a charity. We're not an altruistic outreach program. And because you guys worry about welfare and all these other things, I've suggested an intermediate plan without open borders, where we only accept people into the United States who have jobs. That is, they have to show that some American is willing to hire them, with no restrictions otherwise. And then they get a 5-year visa, which is renewed as long as they get a job. They can never vote, but they can live in the United States as long as they have a job. How about that? That's what I proposed as an interim step before we get open borders. I'm still waiting for some of your challenges, but you see, they're too cowardly to actually put them in bold so I can see them. They just, you know, They just say, oh, Iran is superficial. But where's the question? Where's the deep question to show how superficial I am? Yaron, you said it best before. We want everybody to bring the best ideas and practices from their culture and leave the garbage behind. Yes, and part of how they leave the garbage behind is that we teach them to leave the garbage behind. We identify the garbage for them and said, no, that's not acceptable in America. All right, let's see. Does immigration remain beneficial in a welfare state where incentives to change culture in line with productive values are removed? No, welfare state is unbelievably corrupting, evil and bad. Let's fight the welfare state. There's no reason to fight immigration. Let's fight the welfare state. And my proposal about allowing anybody in with a job should reduce your concern about the welfare state, because they won't need welfare because they'll have a job. So again, don't allow people in completely openly, but allow anybody in who has a job. Not a job that an American won't do, but any job. Somebody's willing to hire this person for an X salary, and let's say a living wage, just so they don't get tempted by food stamps. Then they get a job. How about that? A living wage for them, by the way, not a living wage for an American. Ban immigrants from getting welfare for their life. There are lots of ways you can deal with the welfare issue, right? Make welfare illegal for immigrants. But you see, most people are not really interested in that idea, because most people just don't want immigrants. They don't like immigrants because they're xenophobes and they're racist, or because they're nationalists, whatever the hell that means, or because they have some collectivistic reason not to want immigrants. Let's see. All right, I don't see that. Okay, let's see. Frank asked a question about Grover Cleveland. I'm not going to answer it now. It's not on topic, and I don't know the answer to your question because I don't know the details of what you're referring to. I'll research it and get back to you. What do you think about dual citizenship? Is it good, bad in principle? In practice, does it present any problems, positives? I don't think so. I think the only time that it can present a problem is if when you have dual citizenship, the two countries are enemies of one another, and then they should make you choose. So as long as they're allies, as long as there's no conflict between the two countries, dual citizenship should not be a problem. It's only when, they're antagonistic to one another, there's a real issue, then I think it's legitimate for them to say, oh, wait a minute. You can't be a citizen of the United States and the Soviet Union. We're pretty much at war here. You have to choose. Let's see. Disregard my earlier question, joining late. Is there a downside to only allowing highly skilled immigrants, doctors, engineers, and not allowing immigrants who have lower jobs? Yeah, absolutely. And that is that the lower skilled jobs don't get done, or that the cost of those lower skilled activities goes up, which reduces our standard of living. It goes up artificially. So, and you're missing a lot of activity. I believe that low-skilled immigrants create jobs for low-skilled Americans. I'm sure lots of people who run, businesses in California are illegal immigrants who came in low-skilled and entrepreneurial, developed a business, and now some of the employees are Americans. All right. So I don't think there should be a bias for any particular type of business. It should be anybody with a job. One thing that drives me crazy is when people say, I'm not against legal immigration. Well, if the immigration laws are irrational and unjust, why does it matter if it's illegal? Absolutely. And why aren't you advocating for rational legal immigration, which is much more open? Indeed, the opposite. The people who are against illegal immigration are always against more restrictive legal immigration laws. Do you know of an essay or other reference that compares the philosophies of Kant and Rand, thanks to the high frequency of shows? Not directly, no. I mean, Ayn Rand talked about Kant, but I don't know anybody kind of third party who does that analysis. You might want to look at the companion to Ayn Rand studies that Greg Salamiri is one of the editors of. It might have something about Kant in there. Maybe, I seem to recall that Jason Rines, an objectivist philosopher, has an analysis of Kant versus Rand. And of course, Leonard Peikoff does. I'm pretty sure in his dim hypothesis lectures, he has an analysis of Kant versus Rand. Okay, so I gave you a few sources there. What would border control's jobs be in an open borders? It would be to make sure that terrorists don't come in. It would make sure that enemy combatants, enemy citizens don't come in. So you could ban immigration from certain countries if they were an enemy of yours, like you don't bring in Germans during World War II. But, so that would be their job. Make sure criminals don't come in through the border. And the other job is to make sure people carrying infectious diseases don't come in. So infectious diseases, criminals, and the third category would be enemies of the state. So terrorists or spies, or just citizens of an enemy country. That's their job. I'll keep the question about Grover Cleveland for another time. I agree with you on immigration. My main concern is the consequence of opening the border while we have a large welfare state. I talked about that, so we've talked about that quite a bit. Do you think the fervor against immigration is driven by xenophobia? Yes, to a large degree. And by nationalism, and by false economics. The idea of zero-sum economics, and the idea that I have a right to a job. So socialist economics. The whole idea of a right to a job is big. I hear it all the time on Facebook. But they'll take American jobs. There's no such thing as an American job. There's a job that an entrepreneur created. Jax writes, my dad immigrated here in the 60s. He had to be sponsored and was tested on American history. Do you think that should be done still? Yes. So, well, I think they're two different things. I've said this, and some objectivists don't agree with me, but I think this. And this is a way, by the way, to solve the voting problem. I think it should be very, very easy to come to America and work in America. I think it should be very, very difficult to become a citizen. Citizen gives you voting rights. Citizen gives you all kinds of protections that non-citizens do not have. For that, you should really know the American system of government. You should really understand the system of values of America. Not the philosophy. Not whether you're pro or against particular points of view. But you should understand the philosophical foundations of America in a sense of rights. Not that you agree with them necessarily, because the government shouldn't be in the business of testing you on your ideas. It should be in the business of testing your knowledge about the country. And only people who pass that test should become citizens and vote and so on. By the way, I think we should consider having that test for natural-born Americans before they vote. So maybe we can make it so that you cannot vote unless you pass the test. That would be interesting, because why not have qualifications for people being able to test, to vote? So I think citizenship, voting, is different than just living here. I think pretty much anybody should be able to live here. Few people should be able to vote. The test that they deploy now, any fourth grader could pass. It should be a serious test, a difficult test, a test that really challenged you. And that should be a test for citizenship, but not for work. I did the test. I went through the whole process. I'm an immigrant. as are most of us, many of us in objectivism, whether it's Leonard Peikoff, he's Canadian. Ankar Gate is Canadian. Ilan Jono is got, I guess, Israeli, French. A lot of Keith Lockitch is Canadian. A lot of Canadians in objectivism. But a lot of immigrants. John Ridpath, of course, was so a lot immigrated for Canada. The better Canadians come to America, generally. I just insulted a bunch of my listeners who stayed in Canada. And of course, Ayn Rand was an immigrant. John Ridpath never immigrated to the United States. He stayed in Canada. All right, I'm gonna take your other questions on a future show. I've kept them. I'll do this. Somebody asked, would I be willing to facilitate a brainstorming session on Zoom for those interested in collaborating on a movement? Yes. But what I would need is a list of names. I need to know that there's some serious people who are interested in doing this. I don't want to do it and 3 people or 2 people show up. I want a group. So write to me, Yaron at yaronbrookshow.com. If you're interested in a brainstorming session on starting a movement, and we'll set something up. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks. This has been one of my longer shows. We covered a lot of ground. I'm sure there was still a lot of questions. Nobody asked me about Muslim immigration, so we'll have to leave that for another time. And nobody asked me about Israel and immigration to Israel, so we'll leave that to another time. Happy to answer those questions. I have no problem answering them. So just ask sometime and on the Super Chat, and we'll get to it. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night, and I'll see you on, what day is it today? Tuesday? On Thursday. Tomorrow, no show. On Thursday. We'll do one on Thursday, and then, on Thursday, it's going to be at a different time. So listen, it's going to be at 3 p.m. Eastern time on Thursday, and it's going to be with Amesh Adalja. So we're going to talk about the spike in coronavirus cases and what that means and what that implies and what's causing it and what's going on and whether it's a problem or not and what should be the response. And we'll have Amesh Adalja, the epidemiologist, on, and that'll be at 3 p.m. on Thursday. And then on Saturday, we've got a show with Brad Thompson. We're going to talk about Brad Thompson's essay about the crazy right. And then on Sunday, we've got a show with Andy Bernstein, which is going to be interesting because we're going to pick some topics where we disagree, and we're going to talk about those topics. Somebody approached us and asked us, paid for us to do this show, was interested in paid Andy to come on my show, paid me to have Andy on the show. Not that Andy's not welcome anyway, but to have this particular show, one of the supporters on the Super Chat paid us to do it, so we're doing it. It should be a lot of fun. That'll be on Sunday. So we got a show on Thursday, on Saturday, on Sunday, maybe Friday. We'll see. Have a great rest of your week. Talk to you all on Thursday. Bye.